Trump closed down some potentially antagonistic questions. Especially, there was one reporter who asked about, what cards do you hold? And that was a trigger in the February meeting when Trump told Zelensky, you don't hold the cards. And Zelensky didn't understand the metaphor. He thought he was being accused of playing games.
Well, David Charter is the Times assistant US editor. He's been at the White House this evening. David, good evening to you.
Good evening from Washington, D.C.
First of all, the atmosphere, it was quite different, markedly different to the Oval Office Part 1 between these two leaders, wasn't it? How did they both come across?
It's just incredible what difference this 6 months has made. And actually, you've got to hand it to Zelensky for recovering after that disaster at the end of February. All the work that's gone in over the months to rebuild his relationship with Trump seems to have paid off in this moment that we've just witnessed in an Oval Office that's a bit brighter. There's a lot more gold covering on the walls than when he was first here back in February. And Zelensky played it extremely calmly. J.D. Vance was sitting there on the sofa nearby, but he didn't say anything either. So both sides were on their best behavior, absolutely. And Trump closed down some potentially antagonistic questions. Especially, there was one reporter who asked about, what cards do you hold? And that was a trigger in the February meeting when Trump told Zelensky, you don't hold the cards. And Zelensky didn't understand the metaphor. He thought he was being accused of playing games. And that added to the escalation of the row back in February. And Trump just closed it down and said, look, I'm not talking about that. We're going to get into talks and we're going to talk about what we can do to end the war. And so you could see from the outset that everybody was determined to make this meeting go as smoothly as possible. And that even included the very conservative journalist from America First News, who was the one who asked him in February why a lot of Americans think you're disrespecting this office. Why don't you wear a suit? Of course, Zelensky is dressed a bit more smartly, which Trump remarked upon, than in February. He hasn't got a tie on, but he's dressed in a more smart,
at least he didn't get
outfit.
At least he didn't get criticised for that.
There were smiles and jokes all round because.
Should we hear that moment, David? We've got it. Sorry to interrupt you, but we'll let the clip do the talking, and then all this will make sense.
First of all, President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good.
I said to the one that attacked you last time. Yeah. See, now he's I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
Maybe yours is much better.
It shows how much more relaxed Zelensky is that he then jokes back at the reporter, you're wearing the same suit. This is Brian Glenn, of course, who's a reporter for Real America's Voice. So a nice exchange there, David. Let's talk about the headlines from what we understand. It's called a spray, this really, which sounds a bit weird, but it is the US President and Zelensky taking questions. They're in an open press conference situation, I suppose, with lots of questions coming in from reporters. What are the main headlines? What do our listeners need to be focused on when we talk about what is new, what is being achieved?
Well, first of all, you played at the top how we learned that Trump is going to call Putin straight away after all these meetings today. And he hopes to get this trilateral meeting. That means him, Zelensky and Putin, which the Germans have suggested should be in Europe, possibly Geneva. That's the goal. But I think rather worryingly, Trump did say at the end of that if it doesn't happen, if they can't agree on it, then the fighting will continue. In other words, there was no mention of more sanctions or anything. So that was a slightly concerning note for the and putting pressure on, I imagine, putting pressure on the Ukrainians to try and come round to agreeing to get to the trilateral with Putin. But of course, we also heard Zelensky saying he was asked, what do you need? For Ukraine, and he said we need to rebuild our army. We need the security guarantees. We need everything, he said, meaning that earlier on, Trump had actually even been asked about US troops on the ground. And interestingly, he hadn't closed that down. He'd said, we're talking about these things later. And that was really a no-no before, the idea that American troops could be pledged as part of security guarantees. On the other hand, we also heard Trump sounding a little nervous about calling it a NATO-like guarantee. He said, well, let's see how we describe it, or words to that effect. So there's clearly a lot of negotiating going on about exactly what the security guarantees will be to give the Ukrainians confidence, basically to abandon some of their territory and sign a deal that will be backed up by the West. And that's what this day is all about.
Okay. Any other points of notice? In fact, what I'll do is I'll move on to what we might get later. I'm just aware of time. So the next big thing to look out for is we've got Donald Trump who'll be greeting European leaders in the state dining room. We've got a family photo. And then notably at around 8 o'clock, we get the same again, but with European leaders. And there are many in attendance. So what do you think this might look like, David? Are we to have a similar format to what we've just experienced with Zelensky and Trump? Are there even enough chairs to be able to provide that? Enough microphones, enough podiums? What do you think it's going to look like at 8 o'clock?
Well, there's no, it's not in the Oval Office. It's going to be in the East Room, which is one of the biggest rooms in the White House. And do you know what? Really, they're making it up as they go along, because this wasn't on the schedule this morning, earlier this morning. If they do have a big press conference, I think it's probably a good sign that they've made progress. We were told that Sir Keir Starmer would not take part in a big press conference. I don't know if that's changed, if you're hearing differently to me. So we're just going to have to wait and see how the chips fall after the hard talk that's going to follow in the East Room of the White House, which is, as you say, it's between these 7 European leaders who are all there waiting. Now, they've all arrived earlier than Zelensky, actually, and they're all being held actually in the state dining room, which is the floor above in the White House, waiting for the outcome of the bilateral.
Yeah, so Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and Giorgia Meloni is there as well. I've seen pictures of her too. An interesting meeting of minds there. Not all European leaders, by the way, are in complete consensus about the way ahead, as we understand from reports in Italy this morning. But we'll look at how that plays out as we go through the show. David, always great to speak to you. Do let us know if you hear any more whispers of any other unexpected surprises today. We'll speak to you later. Thank you. David Charter there, who is the Times Assistant US Editor.